Welcome back, guys. It's Andrew here, and we have massive news for those of you who are on Social Security benefits, SSI, and SSDI. Now, the Senate just voted and passed something that could potentially have massive impacts on Social Security benefits down the road. And this is because they could eventually use this same exact tool to increase benefits across the board. And we'll talk about exactly how they could do that in this video. Now, we're also going to compare the amount of funding being approved for military and defense spending and compare that to what they're spending on Social Security benefits. The numbers are quite shocking. And to get straight to the point here, folks, the Senate added $30 billion in funding above and beyond what President Biden asked for military and defense. And when you think about $30 billion, that could be used to not only increase benefits potentially long-term, but even approve a short-term voucher for seniors like that $1,000 voucher that Bernie Sanders has been trying to approve, right? With that said, guys, let's jump right into it. As always, if you guys like this content, please like and subscribe. Now, headlines are showing that the Senate has just passed and approved the annual defense spending bill, and it also included some things with the military where they don't have to get vaccinated for the illness. Now, this is a massive, massive deal, folks. This was done just a couple of days ago, and they approved an $858 billion annual spending for defense and military. That's basically $1 trillion per year, right? And the most shocking part is here, they are spending way more than originally anticipated. Now, they're anticipating spending $800 million here on Ukraine, as well as more to help Taiwan defend themselves against China. Now, I quickly want to jump into the numbers here that show you the fact that they are including hundreds of billions of dollars that's going to be funneled to private companies. Yes, a lot of this money isn't just spent directly on the military to take care of the soldiers and things like that. It's also spent on research and development. So hundreds of billions of dollars are going to companies like Boeing, Raytheon, Northrop Grumman Group, like all of these massive companies, when a lot of this money could be spent on increasing benefits, right? And one of the most important topics here is the fact that the Senate actually added $30 billion. The exact number is $27 billion added to the national defense budget above and beyond what the Pentagon asked for and what President Biden asked for. Now think about it, folks. If you gave every senior on benefits, and this includes Social Security, SSI, and SSDI, if you gave every senior a $500 voucher, which, it's not much, but it's half of what Bernie Sanders wanted to do, but it's still something. And the point of the voucher is to help seniors out until they permanently increase benefits. If you just did that, that would cost about $30 billion. So they say they don't have the money, right? They say they can't get these things done, but then not only are they spending almost $1 trillion on the military, they're adding an additional $27 billion at the very last minute in the Senate. And the scariest part here, folks, the scariest part is a good chunk of this doesn't even have to be audited. It's completely insane. Now, it's estimated that about $42 billion in funding in this budget that was approved does not have to be audited. They essentially call this a classified black budget, meaning, this is classified. These are things that for national security folks can't know about. And that's fine, right? The concept of that is okay. We understand why that could be true. But essentially what's happening is an additional $42 billion is being spent on the military, and we don't know where it's going, right? And then at the same time, they're adding another $27 billion, which isn't part of that $42 billion, and saying, you know what, this is necessary, but then we can't afford to even spend $30 billion on seniors. Folks, it's just not right. So I just want to make the comparison there that this is the amount they're spending on military. This is the amount they're spending that's classified. We don't even know where it's going. There's also an additional $27 billion being added. It's just completely ridiculous, right? And let me know your thoughts on that in the comments below. Now, obviously on this channel, we've been fighting for things like increasing benefits, Social Security, SSI, SSDI, increasing benefits for widows, those who are disabled, and even the $1,000 voucher that Bernie Sanders was trying to approve last year, which has basically fallen to the wayside, right? But it's really important that we talk about this annual military spending bill. And why could this potentially help seniors and those who are on benefits in the future? Well, let's quickly talk about Joe Manchin. And yeah, Joe Manchin always comes up. He's a huge pain in the butt. But when this bill was in the Senate just a couple of days ago, the Senate, the bill goes to the floor of the Senate, and then all these senators try and add amendments. They want to add this, they want to add that. And the funny thing is, the majority of these things that they're trying to add as amendments have nothing to do with the military. That sounds completely ridiculous, right? It sounds preposterous. This bill is for military spending. Nothing else should be included. Well, folks, every year, those folks in the Senate, they know that hardly anything in Congress gets done, but this annual military spending bill has to get done. They have to approve it every single year. So what ends up happening, like every other massive bill, like you saw with the stimulus packages, they throw on a bunch of fat onto the bill, right? They add whatever they want for their districts or for their states, and then they try and kind of piggyback that onto the bill, and basically nobody really notices, right? Well, essentially what I'm getting at here is they could potentially do this with benefits as well and use the military spending bill to increase benefits as well. And that might sound a little bit crazy, but think about it. Joe Manchin, just a couple of days ago, was trying to add an amendment that he's been trying to get done for about a couple of years now to make it easier to get permits to create more fossil fuel pipelines, right? We know he works in the natural gas industry. He's been trying to get these laws passed where it's easier to get permits, so it's easier for businesses to expand and make more money, obviously. And, that was denied. They didn't add it to it, but it could have been added, right? And it literally has nothing to do with the military. It has nothing to do with national defense. Now, of course, you could say, with the geopolitical conflict going on with Russia, making America more fuel independent could be a national security issue. But let's be honest, folks, you could say that with pretty much anything, right? You could say protecting seniors is a national security issue as well. Let's just be honest here. And the point is, they could literally add a Social Security amendment to the annual national defense spending bill. Again, I know that sounds crazy, but these things get added all the time, like the example I was just giving you with Joe Manchin. And this goes back to the fact that they need 60 votes in the Senate to make any changes to Social Security, right? And let's quickly recap that. Over the last couple of years, Democrats, they passed multiple stimulus packages using budget reconciliation, right? At this point, most of you know what that is, and it's a process that basically has to do with amending the annual budget, and it only requires 50 votes in the Senate, which is why Democrats were able to get it done without a single Republican vote, because it only required 50 as opposed to the normal 60, which is usually required. Now, the problem was there is a senator named Byrd, and they call this the Byrd rule, where he set a precedent decades ago that you cannot include Social Security benefit changes in budget reconciliation packages. Now, I'm going to be clear here. It doesn't technically say anywhere in the rules that you can't include Social Security benefits in budget reconciliation, but because of this precedent that Senator Byrd set, now they just go ahead and say, no, you can't do it. This precedent's been set. This arbitrary precedent that was set by Senator Byrd, which funny enough, he was the senator of West Virginia, which is currently the state of Joe Manchin, obviously. So apparently senators in West Virginia are just destined to be massive pains in the butt, especially for seniors and folks who are disabled. But because of that precedent, which is completely ridiculous, it just makes no sense, right? It's completely objective. Now they're saying you can't include Social Security benefit changes in budget reconciliation. So for those of you who are wondering why nothing got done in those packages for Social Security, that's really the main reason why, right? Now, at the same time, we didn't have President Biden fighting enough for seniors, right? He could have been fighting for seniors. He could have been mentioning it, on a weekly basis, pushing for this agenda to get done like he did on the campaign trail. Obviously, that didn't happen. We did have folks like Bernie Sanders and AOC pushing for this, but at the end of the day, it could not have been included in budget reconciliation. Now, the interesting thing is, technically, according to experts, it could be included in the annual defense spending bill, which again sounds kind of ridiculous, but again, they do this every single year. If you go through that defense bill, they add tons of stuff that has nothing to do with the military. Again, like I said previously in today's show, Joe Manchin just this week was trying to include an amendment to make it easier to get permits approved to extend and create more natural gas pipelines, of course, to make him and his buddies richer in the natural gas industry. So this is why this vote is really, really interesting to look at, because when push comes to shove, I mean, they could try and include changes to Social Security in an annual defense spending bill. Now, I'm not saying this would be a massive sweeping change. I'm not saying they're going to say, okay, increase benefits by 30%, but they could do certain things like, you know what? We're going to do an emergency, $1,000 voucher for seniors that Bernie Sanders wants to do, and we're going to include this in the annual defense spending bill. That could potentially happen, right? I'm not saying they're going to make sweeping permanent changes, but if they're spending, $30 billion on additional funds that we don't even know what they're going to be used for, that were added last minute, that Biden didn't even request, the Pentagon didn't even request, why wouldn't they spend $30 billion on seniors? If they're spending $40 billion in unknown classified money, why can't they spend $40 billion on seniors? That $40 billion could be enough to give every senior on benefits about a $700 voucher or stimulus check, right? Whatever you want to call that. So this is why I thought it was extremely interesting to show you guys, not only did the Senate approve the annual defense spending bill, but I wanted to compare with you the amount they're spending on different things like Ukraine, the amount they're spending on classified funding that we don't even know what it's used for. Compare that to what it would cost to give seniors a voucher, right? A $1,000 voucher, or even just increase benefits. And not only compare that to Social Security benefits, but also kind of point out the fact that Democrats and Republicans use the annual defense spending bill to approve of a bunch of crap that they want to get approved. So why can't they do it for Social Security benefits, right? And some experts have said that they could technically include that in the annual defense spending bill, right? So we'll have to wait and see what happens. Now, folks, as always, Bernie Sanders has been fighting for the American people, and he came out and made a public statement about the annual defense spending bill and how ridiculous it is. No matter how much you support the troops and you support, America and all that, I do as well. But when we're spending $1 trillion a year on national security and defense, folks, give me a break. You can't spend, $50 billion on seniors. You can't spend $50 billion on those who are disabled. Give me a freaking break. Now, Bernie Sanders came out and said that we need to reassess our priorities here, and we need to start spending more money on the American people. So let's take a quick look and see what Bernie Sanders had to say.
The record-breaking $858 billion defense funding bill. The House passed that this week. The Senate is going to vote on it. You voted against the NDAA, the defense bill, last time around. Will you do so again?
Yes, I think I will. Look, we have 85 million Americans who have no health insurance. We have 600,000 people who are homeless. We have a dysfunctional healthcare system, dysfunctional childcare system where working parents are paying $15,000 a year on average for childcare. We have got to start protecting the needs of working families. The Pentagon is the one major agency of government which has never been independently audited. There is massive waste and fraud and cost overruns within that agency. So I think we can have the strong defense that we need without spending the huge amount of money that we're currently spending on the military.
I want to ask.
But I would tell you, Dana, I look forward very much to becoming chairman of the Health Education Labor Committee, and I want to tell you that in that job, I intend to do everything I can to lower the outrageously high cost of prescription drugs in this country, and we're going to take on the pharmaceutical industry. We're going to take on the insurance industry and try to end the situation where we are the only major country on earth that doesn't guarantee health care to all people. I remain very concerned, as I said, about child care. I believe that child care in this country should not only be affordable, it should be universal. We got to deal with student debt. There are enormous crises facing working families, and I hope that the United States Congress, perhaps in some instances in a bipartisan way, will have the courage to take on the billionaire class who are doing phenomenally well. Corporations enjoying record-breaking profits.
Okay, so obviously Bernie Sanders touching on a lot there, right? But it's really important the fact that he pointed out that we have to prioritize the American people, and we also have to think about the fact that this military spending it's not really being audited, right? And according to Bernie Sanders, from his own words, it's rife with fraud and it's rife with waste, right? Like we just showed you earlier in today's show, they're spending $40 billion of classified funding, which we don't know what it's going for, when a lot of that money could go towards helping seniors as well. And if you're just joining the show, I want to quickly recap what we're talking about today is the annual defense spending bill, the fact that they're spending hundreds of billions of dollars when they could be spending some of this on seniors. They spent an additional $30 billion above and beyond what Biden and the Pentagon asked for. And then on top of that, we got $40 billion that's classified. We don't even know where that's going. That's $70 billion, which is almost the exact amount that it would cost to give every single person on benefits a $1,000 voucher, which Bernie Sanders was pushing for last year, right? But quickly, guys, I want to play this clip from Bernie Sanders. This clip came out a bit ago, and he goes a little deeper into the fact that the military spending is bloated. Yes, we have to protect, safety. We have to fund the military. But to spend basically $1 trillion, which hundreds of billions of which we can't even account for, and not help seniors, not try and increase benefits, that's a little bit ridiculous, right? And again, if you're just joining today's show, one thing we pointed out is the fact that a lot of senators, they actually add amendments to the annual spending bill that have nothing to do with military spending. For example, Joe Manchin was trying to add an amendment to make it easier to get permits approved to extend natural gas pipelines. And now the idea has come about of, wait, if you can add those things to the annual defense budget, why not add a $1,000 voucher for seniors, right? Why not add provisions for Social Security, SSI, or SSDI? Because congressmen know that hardly anything gets done in Congress every single year, but one of the things that has to get done and will get done every single year is the annual defense spending budget, and this is why they add on a ton of stuff that has nothing to do with the military, right? And a lot of experts are saying that they could technically include provisions for Social Security benefits as well, and that's why this vote in the Senate is massive news, because it kind of highlights the fact that this is how Congress works, right? Unfortunately, this is what congressmen do. They add a bunch of stuff to the military defense budget. You don't even know what's on there, and then business just keeps going on as usual, folks. So if they're using ridiculous tactics to get things approved, the least they could do is use them to help folks who are on benefits as well. But let me know your thoughts on that in the comments below. Now, really quickly, guys, I want to play this clip from Bernie Sanders. He goes a little bit deeper into the fact that we need to shift from spending so much money. It's fine to spend a ton of money on the military and defense, but let's take some of that money and shift it towards the American people. So let's take a look and see what Bernie Sanders had to say.
Mr. President, if there was ever a moment in American history to fundamentally alter our national priorities, now is the time. Whether it is fighting against systemic racism and police brutality, transforming our energy system away from fossil fuel, ending a cruel and dysfunctional healthcare system, or addressing the grotesque levels of income and wealth inequality in our country, now is the time for change, real change. And when we talk about real change, it is incredible to me the degree to which Congress continues to ignore our bloated $740 billion defense budget, which has gone up by over $100 billion since Trump has been in office. Year after year, Democrats and Republicans who disagree on almost everything come together with minimal debate to support an exploding Pentagon budget, which is now higher than the next 11 countries combined. Now higher than the next 11 countries combined, and which represents more than half of our discretionary spending. Incredibly, after adjusting for inflation, we are now spending more on the military than we did during the height of the Cold War, when we faced a major adversary in the Soviet Union, or during the wars in Vietnam and Korea. This extraordinary level of military spending comes at a time when the Department of Defense is the only agency of our federal government that has not been able to pass an independent audit, when defense contractors are making enormous profits while paying their CEOs exorbitant compensation packages, and when the so-called war on terror will end up costing us some $6 trillion. I believe that this is a moment in history where it would be a very good.
Just think about that, folks. The war in Afghanistan cost $6 trillion, and they say they can't afford to spend $100 billion on seniors. Just think about that for a second.
For all of my colleagues and the American people to remember what former Republican President Dwight D. Eisenhower said in 1953. And as we all recall, Eisenhower was a four-star general who led the Allied forces to victory in Europe during World War II. He knew something about war and defense spending. Eisenhower said, and I quote, and this is a profound statement that we should never forget. Eisenhower said, and I quote, "Every gun that is made, every warship launched, every rocket signifies, in the final sense, a theft from those who hunger and are not fed, those who are cold and are not clothed. This world in arms is not spending money alone. It is spending the sweat of its laborers, the genius of its scientists, the hopes of its children." End quote, Dwight D. Eisenhower. What Eisenhower said was profoundly true 67 years ago, and it is profoundly true today. If the horrific pandemic we are now experiencing has taught us anything, it is that national security is not just building bombs, missiles, jet fighters, tanks, submarines, nuclear warheads, and other weapons of mass destruction. National security also means doing everything we can to improve the lives of our people, many of whom have been abandoned by our government decade after decade.
All right, sorry about that, folks. So if you're just joining the show, we're talking about the fact that the Senate just voted to approve almost $1 trillion spending bill for the National Defense Act. Now, this is not only an insane amount, which is fine if you want to spend money on the military, but it's such a staggering amount, and it includes $40 billion, which are put as classified. We don't even know what $40 billion are being spent on. There's also an additional $27 billion that was added at the very last minute in the Senate, which was $27 billion above and beyond what President Biden asked for and even what the Pentagon asked for. And it brings us to the question, if they could spend $30 billion and then $40 billion on classified stuff we don't even know what it's being spent on, that's $70 billion. That's more than it would cost to give everybody on benefits who's on Social Security, SSI, and SSDI combined a $1,000 voucher, which Bernie Sanders wanted to include in the last stimulus package to help seniors until they could permanently increase Social Security benefits and permanently lower the cost of healthcare, right? Not only that, but there's also the fact that every year this national defense budget is approved, they add a bunch of stuff to it that has nothing to do with the military. And the example we gave in today's show was the fact that Joe Manchin was trying to add an amendment that would make it easier to approve natural gas pipeline extensions just to enrich him and his business partners, which just goes to show that if they wanted to, they could include something for Social Security benefits in the annual defense spending bill as well. Let me know your guys' thoughts on that in the comments below. Now, to quickly recap here, we already established the fact that you need 60 votes in the Senate to do any changes when it comes to Social Security benefits, and this is because you cannot include it in budget reconciliation, that process that Democrats used for the previous stimulus packages. And because they cannot include it in budget reconciliation, first of all, they can't because of an arbitrary rule called the Byrd Rule, which was Senator of West Virginia Byrd. Funny enough, he also, that's where Joe Manchin is now. He created a precedent where basically he decided, you know what, you cannot include Social Security changes in budget reconciliation. So now, based off of this arbitrary decision, going forward, they can't use budget reconciliation to increase benefits. But some experts are saying that because they're constantly including random things in the annual defense spending bill, they could technically do it with Social Security benefits as well. Now, it wouldn't be anything permanent like increasing benefits across the board permanently, but a $1,000 voucher for seniors like Bernie has been trying to approve would be fair game to be included in the annual defense spending bill. So folks, let me know your thoughts on that in the comments below. Guys, also in the news is the fact that former President Trump is trying to defend Kevin McCarthy from his own right-wing Republicans. Now, we all know that former President Trump's trying to come back in office, and this could have massive impacts for folks on Social Security benefits as well. Now, on the one hand, we're probably going to have President Biden versus former President Trump in the general election. It's not guaranteed. It could be DeSantis. It could be somebody else. But in any case, who ends up in office could have massive impacts on seniors, as they either could fight to increase benefits, fight to decrease benefits, or just kind of put the whole, problem on the shelf and not bring it up at all. Obviously, currently we have President Biden, who has said he wants to fight for seniors and he wants to fight to increase benefits, but we haven't seen him actually do that in practice since he's been in office, right? All the talk came before he came elected. We haven't heard President Biden say much about Social Security since he was elected. Now, former President Trump, he had a similar kind of tactic. He also said he would help seniors and help those who are on benefits. His promises were not nearly as large as President Biden's on the campaign, but similar to President Biden, he basically ignored the topic once he was elected, right? Well, President Trump, he's already trying to angle to increase his power in Congress if he gets reelected in 2024. And the problem he's having now is obviously he's dead to Mitch McConnell, right? Mitch McConnell essentially said he never wants to talk to Trump again. And during the midterms, Mitch McConnell was basically undermining the majority of the candidates that Trump was trying to get in the House and the Senate, right? So these two have been jockeying for power. Now, Kevin McCarthy does get along with former President Trump. So when you think about it, Trump wants Kevin McCarthy to become the Speaker of the House. That way, at least he's got one person in power that he can count on, right? If he can't count on Mitch McConnell, he at least wants to be able to count on Kevin McCarthy to make sure he has strong influence in the House. And we know the Speaker of the House works with, the leader in the Senate, similarly to how Pelosi and Schumer have been working together over the last couple of years, right? So this is really what Trump's working on. And again, it could have massive impacts on seniors because whoever becomes the president, obviously, they're either going to fight for seniors or they're not, quite frankly. And Trump is angling to improve his influence in the House. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, guys. If former President Trump gets in office, do you think he'll fight for seniors, or do you think he'll ignore it like Biden did as well? Let me know your thoughts on that in the comments below. Before we end today's show, guys, one last topic I want to talk about is rents. We all know rents have been skyrocketing massively, and this especially has been hurting seniors the most, right? Folks who are working age, they can get a second job. If rent goes up, they can get a side hustle. They can go drive for Uber or drive for Amazon, right? You can do that part-time whenever you want. But seniors who are disabled, folks who are older, folks who have worked for 40, 50 years, they can't necessarily go out and do that. And quite frankly, they shouldn't have to, right? Seniors shouldn't have to do that. Well, now it's been coming out that although rents have been skyrocketing, they've kind of started to flatten out, right? And the weird thing is, some articles say rents are still going up, and then some articles say rents have begun going down. But in any case, they're basically starting to get flat, but they're still up a lot when it comes to last year, and especially when it comes to 2 years ago. Now, guys, let me know in the comments, the location that you're living in, are you still seeing rents go up? Let me know in the comments below. But I want to remind you guys that actually on my channel, for my channel members, if you click the join button next to the subscribe button, first of all, it supports my work. You can pay a monthly donation. And I also provide a service where if you leave me your zip code in the comments, if you're a member, I'm going to go into your zip code and I'm going to research exactly all the benefits and assistance plans that are available to you at the local level. And again, most of these funding programs are actually at the local level. It takes a lot of research to find these things, right? So if you guys want to support my work and you want me to help you find local assistance in your area, hit the join button next to subscribe. Again, it supports my work and it's a service I provide for my members as well. Now, guys, quickly before I end today's show, I just want to recap exactly what we talked about for those of you who just joined the show. Now, as far as what the Senate voted on, this is referring to the annual defense spending bill, and this is something that has to get done every single year. Now, the shocking part isn't the fact that they spent almost $1 trillion, or they're going to spend almost $1 trillion in 2023. The shocking fact is the fact that they're spending $40 billion of unknown classified funds, and we'll never know what they're spending it on. But then they tell us that they cannot spend $40 billion on seniors to give them a $1,000 voucher until they permanently increase benefits. Of course, that voucher is what Bernie Sanders was fighting for all throughout 2021 and the earlier part of 2022. Secondly, we also have the fact that this tool, right, this annual spending defense budget could potentially be used to increase benefits as well. And the reason they could potentially do this is because they're constantly adding things to this bill every single year that has nothing, absolutely nothing, to do with the actual military and defense. And the best example we had from just this year was a couple of days ago. Joe Manchin was trying to add an amendment that would make it easier and faster to approve permits to extend natural gas pipelines, of course, to further enrich him and his friends, right? So a lot of experts are saying, well, first of all, that did not get added to the package, but he was trying to add it to the bill. But a lot of experts are saying that if you can add, arbitrary things to this spending bill every single year, why can you not add some kind of provision to help seniors as well, right? And Bernie Sanders himself said that they could potentially add something to the bill that could help the American people, potentially something for seniors in this package. Now, Bernie Sanders was talking about the fact that they need to stop spending less on this defense spending bill and more on the American people. So let's quickly take a look and see what Bernie Sanders had to say. And again, this is for those of you who are just joining the show now.
The record-breaking $858 billion defense funding bill. The House passed that this week. The Senate is going to vote on it. You voted against the NDAA, the defense bill, last time around. Will you do so again?
Yes, I think I will. Look, we have 85 million Americans who have no health insurance. We have 600,000 people who are homeless. We have a dysfunctional healthcare system, dysfunctional child care system where working parents are paying $15,000 a year on average for child care. We have got to start protecting the needs of working families. The Pentagon is the one major agency of government which has never been independently audited. There is massive waste and fraud and cost overruns within that agency. So I think we can have the strong defense that we need without spending the huge amount of money that we're currently spending on the military.
I want to ask.
But I would tell you, Dana, I look forward very much to becoming chairman of the Health Education Labor Committee, and I want to tell you that in that job, I intend to do everything I can to lower the outrageously high cost of prescription drugs in this country. And we're going to take on the pharmaceutical industry. We're going to take on the insurance industry and try to end the situation where we are the only major country on earth that doesn't guarantee health care to all people. I remain very concerned, as I said, about child care. I believe that child care in this country should not only be affordable, it should be universal. We got to deal with student debt. There are enormous crises facing working families, and I hope that the United States Congress, perhaps in some instances in a bipartisan way, will have the courage.
All right, guys, so let me know your thoughts on that in the comments. Again, that what we're talking about here is the idea of potentially adding some kind of provision in the annual defense spending bill that could help seniors and those who are on benefits. And the reason we're saying this, which might sound crazy to you if you're just joining today's show, is the fact that this is actually a tactic that senators and congressmen in the House and Republicans and Democrats alike, they both do this. They attach things to this annual spending bill, which was just voted on in the Senate, that have nothing to do with the military, right? The best example we had here from a couple of days ago was Joe Manchin trying to attach a permitting amendment, which would make it easier to approve natural gas pipeline extensions. Then that brought us to the question, is if they're constantly adding fat to these bills, right? And the reason they're adding them specifically to the annual spending bill, defense spending bill, is because they know hardly anything gets done every year in Congress, right? Hardly anything. Maybe budget reconciliation. During the pandemic, obviously, we had the stimulus packages. And besides that, you have the annual spending bill and the annual defense spending bill. And, raising the debt ceiling. That's basically it for the most part, right? So congressmen know that if you want to add something, for your state or for your district, you're going to add it to the annual defense spending bill, like we just showed this example for Joe Manchin. Worth pointing out that was rejected, thank God. Joe Manchin's not going to get his way. If he ain't helping the American people, he shouldn't get his way either, right? But the question is there. Why don't they use this same process to at least do something for seniors? Even if it's just that $1,000 voucher that Bernie Sanders has been fighting for, why not include that in the annual defense spending bill? And folks, let me know your thoughts on that in the comments below. Now, for those of you just joining, I want to share this clip from Bernie Sanders going deeper into the idea that we should be funneling less towards the annual defense budget and more towards helping the American people, right? And this clip is from a couple of years ago, but it really embodies what Bernie Sanders has been fighting for, right? And if you were watching the show earlier when I first started, you already saw this clip, but the majority of you just joined. So let's take a quick look and see what Bernie Sanders had to say.
To fundamentally alter our national priorities, now is the time. Whether it is fighting against systemic racism and police brutality, transforming our energy system away from fossil fuel, ending a cruel and dysfunctional healthcare system, or addressing the grotesque levels of income and wealth inequality in our country. Now is the time for change, real change. And when we talk about real change, it is incredible to me the degree to which Congress continues to ignore our bloated $740 billion defense budget, which has gone up by over $100 billion since Trump has been in office. Year after year, Democrats and Republicans who disagree on almost everything come together with minimal debate to support an exploding Pentagon budget, which is now higher than the next 11 countries combined. Now higher than the next 11 countries combined, and which represents more than half of our discretionary spending. Incredibly, after adjusting for inflation, we are now spending more on the military than we did during the height of the Cold War, when we faced a major adversary in the Soviet Union, or during the wars in Vietnam and Korea. This extraordinary level of military spending comes at a time when the Department of Defense is the only agency of our federal government that has not been able to pass an independent audit, when defense contractors are making enormous profits while paying their CEOs exorbitant compensation packages, and when the so-called war on terror will end up costing us some $6 trillion. I believe that this is a moment in history where it would be a very good idea for all of my colleagues and the American people to remember what former Republican President Dwight D. Eisenhower said in 1953. And as we all recall, Eisenhower was a four-star general who led the Allied forces to victory in Europe during World War II. He knew something about war and defense spending. Eisenhower said, and I quote, and this is a profound statement that we should never forget. Eisenhower said, and I quote, "Every gun that is made, every warship launched, every rocket signifies, in the final sense, a theft from those who hunger and are not fed, those who are cold and are not clothed. This world in arms is not spending money alone. It is spending the sweat of its laborers, the genius of its scientists, the hopes of its children." End quote, Dwight D. Eisenhower. What Eisenhower said was profoundly true 67 years ago, and it is profoundly true today. If the horrific pandemic we are now experiencing has taught us anything, it is that national security is not just building bombs, missiles, jet fighters, tanks, submarines, nuclear warheads, and other weapons of mass destruction. National security also means doing everything we can to improve the lives of our people, many of whom have been abandoned by our government decade after decade.
All right, everyone, let me know your thoughts on that. And let me know your thoughts on this idea of just kind of what they're spending on the military as opposed to what they're spending on seniors. And I mean, it's really shameful what's happening. And when you're seeing these amendments being added to these bills, right, just think about the fact that they could be adding something for seniors as well, right? As crazy as it sounds, because it has nothing to do with the military, congressmen do this every single year because they know that's the best way to get things done, as they know hardly anything gets done every year, but the annual defense spending budget will. So guys, with that said, thank you so much for watching. Again, if you like this content, please subscribe, like this video if you liked it as well. Hope you have a good day, and I'll see you on the next show.